What's up, marketing legends, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm producer Liza from Xgrowth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So wherever you are, get comfy and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Growth Colony, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of B2B growth, marketing, and leadership. I'm your host, Shahin, and today we have a very special guest, someone who needs no introduction in the world of MarTech, Scott Brinker, VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, and the man behind the MarTech 5000 supergraphic joins us today to unpack the ever-evolving MarTech landscape. In this episode, we'll explore how composable MarTech stacks are transforming marketing teams, the role of AI agents in shaping the future of workflows, and a fascinating concept called service as a software that's disrupting traditional SaaS models. Plus, Scott will share his thoughts on how marketers can upskill and stay ahead in this fast-paced industry. Whether you're a CMO, a marketer looking to future-proof your career, or just someone fascinated by the intersection of technology and marketing, this episode is packed with insights, so you don't want to miss it. Let's jump in. Scott, it's an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
Wow, well, thank you for that, incredibly generous introduction. It's wonderful to be here with you. It sounds like we've got quite a packed agenda.
We do. There's a lot of interesting stuff that I'm really excited to unpack with you. There's obviously a lot of interesting stuff happening in the space, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I want to kind of start with composable tech stack, right? For people who might be listening, can we first unpack that? Can we first kind of talk about what you mean when, or what is your definition of composable when somebody says that?
Yeah, it's a good place to start because composability is one of those things that just sounds very techy, and certainly with a number of MarTech vendors, it's become very buzzword-like. We talk about composable CDPs and composable DXPs, and I think in some ways the label obfuscates what is at its heart a very simple and straightforward thing, which is we know we are operating in an environment where we have multiple services, we have multiple data sources, we have multiple things we want to deliver either from a workflow or from a customer experience. And for many of these workflows and customer experiences, they don't exist in a single stream. We have to combine different pieces of data or different pieces of services together to execute them. And that's what composition is. It's composing these things together. Very often the overused metaphor is Lego. I've got these different Lego blocks. I've got this data Lego block here, and this other one here, and this content Lego block here. And for this particular customer experience, I want to combine these two or three things together. Sounds straightforward. Now, the challenge has been historically, that's very often what we've actually wanted to do. And I just want the workflow to work this way, or I just want the customer experience to be this. It's actually been very difficult to do this because, a lot of MarTech products, in their first generations, they were sort of designed to be self-contained and when you're operating in our product, it all works here and the data's here. This idea of opening up products so that the data could flow bi-directionally from a lot of these products, or opening them up with APIs, so that you could actually execute things with a product, not just through the user interface, but through some sort of programmatic request, maybe from a workflow automation that you put in place. That's actually, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively new evolution in the MarTech industry, where steadily over the past 5-6 years, MarTech products have steadily been pushed into a place where they need to open up their data, they need to open up their APIs, just driven by customer demand. And that's getting us into a world now where this ability to compose things together is a lot more practical than it was 5 years ago. And I suspect we'll probably end up talking a bit about AI. And when we do, we can also talk about how some of this composability actually sets a foundation that's going to power a lot of the cool things that people sort of anticipate on the horizon with AI.
Yeah, because I think that's a very interesting point to kind of touch on, where why has this become relevant now, and why are people talking about it? Because I'm sure it was. I feel like it was part PR, and part maybe reality. That article that came out that I'm blanking on the name of the organization, but they're moving away from Salesforce and
Klarna. Right?
Klarna, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. And Workday, and it feels like it was part PR and part, there's some truth, I think, to it, where and by to it I mean organizations thinking of, hey, we're going to create this super custom platform for us through AI, and we're going to have a couple of developers and build it out ourselves. Why has this become, you said it's due to customer demand, but why has this become a recent thing? This composability, why now?
So I can answer that by saying so much of MarTech over the past 10 years was a study in dichotomies, right? You were faced with these choices. Either we buy a suite and everything, like everything in the suite works well together, or at least theoretically everything
Hopefully,
in the suite works
yes.
together. Yeah, that's the theory. That's what the PowerPoint said. Or we go best of breed, where, okay, yeah, we've got the best capabilities for anything we want, but boy, the burden is really on us to figure out how the hell do we get this stuff to work together. And when you think about it, neither one of those choices was ideal, because like in both cases they were suboptimal trade-offs for like what the marketing team actually wanted to be able to execute. We've had another dichotomy between this concept of build versus buy. Like, oh, well, you're either going to buy this product or you're going to build the equivalent on your own. And I think one of the things that's very exciting about the evolution of, MarTech and tech more broadly, but, in the context of marketing MarTech, is that we're starting to move away from these dichotomies to more of convergences. So instead of, I have to choose between suite or best of breed, it's this idea that, you have these products at the core of your tech stack, but they're open platforms. They're not just suites, they're platforms, so the APIs are open, the data is open, they have specific ecosystem programs designed to help other MarTech products integrate with that platform to make it easier out of the box to be able to share data or to, leverage services between these. And so it's sort of going from the dichotomy of suite versus best of breed to platform ecosystems. Full disclaimer, obviously, this is what I do at HubSpot, is I help HubSpot with their platform ecosystems. I'm biased, take everything I say there with a grain of salt. But that was very much the vision. So, like, you don't have to make this choice between these two things. They should really work well together. And I think it's a very similar thing in that build versus buy dichotomy is like, well, wait a second. I mean, if our only choice is to buy and take something off the shelf and be constrained by what some other company thought was going to be the right customer experience for our customers or the right workflow for our digital operations, you're like, well, no, because I kind of want my thing to be a little bit unique. And I have my own processes. I have my own vision of this. But that doesn't mean I want to go to the other extreme. I think the Klarna is the other extreme of like, nah, hey, listen, we'll just build all this stuff ourselves. That there is actually the ability with these platforms to have the best of both worlds, which is to say, listen, I don't want to build my own email delivery service. For crying out loud, it's incredibly commoditized. I just buy that service and that capability. I don't want to build, like a whole, like data management system here. I mean, there's just great commercial products. I can, what do they say, that comparative advantage in economics. It's just not where I should be investing my resources. But if I am buying these commercial products that are sort of the Lego pieces at the foundation of the thing I'm creating, and then on top of those, I want to basically then add the layer, a relatively shallow layer of what makes it unique. What do I want custom? I want this custom actual experience for a particular customer. Like that becomes, again, moving away from build versus buy to kind of a synthesis of the two.
So Scott, on the back of what you just mentioned, I'm curious to know, what do you think the suit play is going to look like moving forward? I mean, I know, a lot of organizations, a lot of vendors look at, hey, we got to build this ecosystem. So when somebody comes in, we service everything or maximize the service that we offer to them. Do you think that's going to change, or do you think that's going to stay the same, even though, we're talking about the composability of this data being able to very freely be shared? Do you think there are going to be organizations, the Apple-like organizations, we're still going to lock everything up and be like, nope, you either use our platform or you go outside? What are your thoughts on the suit play going forward?
Yeah, I kind of feel that the days of a closed suite are pretty much gone at this point. But the days of a master platform at the center of the stack that serves both as almost like the grand central station, of the data around, customer interactions, but also a little bit of the air traffic control of like, okay, how are we orchestrating activities and engagements with customers? I think that's actually very strong. In fact, actually, I would argue the more heterogeneity you have out in your tech stack, the more variety of different tools or data sources or data use cases that you have, the more important it is to have some sort of center of gravity that is helping to orchestrate that. Otherwise, it's just chaos, So I think to me, the difference between suite and platform is the suites are basically trying to do everything themselves. And that just ultimately wasn't sustainable in an environment where the technology just keeps evolving too quickly. There are too many varied use cases. There's too many different differences between what this customer wants and what that other customer wants. You just can't serve all of this and keep it up to date as one vendor. I mean, Microsoft can't do it. Google can't do it. Amazon can't do it. I mean, the largest software companies in the world can't do it, But that being said, if you can have a platform that serves as that center of gravity, helping to orchestrate these things, and that you can then extend that by integrating with, frankly, any of the other best of breed tools, that you want. But the data is all coming into one common place. These other tools are leveraging data from that one common place. If you have like workflow automation or workflow orchestration, there's like one central place that's doing that. That becomes incredibly valuable. You don't have to build all of the things for all of the people, but if you can build the thing that is the orchestrator, and actually Apple's like a perfect example of this, again, the iPhone started as a completely closed thing, but what really turned it into the powerhouse it is when they opened it up to be a platform. So you have these million some odd apps, that you can plug into the iPhone, but they don't just willy-nilly plug into the iPhone. There's some structure to this, and there's some governance about how this works. I mean, that is almost the quintessential ideal. In fact, I don't think we're yet there in the B2B tech stack world, but that's like the ideal. We want that one platform at the center that's providing cohesion, but at the same time, we want to be able to tap into the innovation, of any specialized app for our particular needs at that particular time.
Interesting. The iPhone of the B2B world. Scott, I want to also chat about AI, of course, and specifically AI and MarTech. I mean, I feel like AI is changing so much when it comes to workflows, whether it's, from Copilot to kind of customer-facing agents. What are some of the most transformative? How do you see AI being the most transformative role in MarTech today? Where do you think that's going?
Yeah, well, I mean, AI is a big umbrella. It's already been deeply embedded in MarTech from a machine learning perspective for many years now. Like a lot of these things we think of around how lead scoring or, churn propensity, so all that stuff is machine learning, send time optimization for emails. Of course, now the past couple of years, we've got this whole new toy in the toy box of, generative AI. And I think what excites me most about generative AI is there's certainly use cases where people have it today to help accelerate the production of content. I don't think it's yet at a place where we want to trust it to just go do the content on its own, but helping to accelerate the production process, helping to maybe expand the creative range of what individuals are capable of doing. I think that's very real, and I think it's getting better very rapidly. But the other thing I get excited about these generative AI interfaces is how they can help the marketing user. One of the things about MarTech is it's gotten complex. All these different products, they've got so many capabilities and so much power. But to be honest, for a lot of these things, like figuring out how to use it, I mean, the whole UI paradigm we've been living in for like 30 years of, okay, well, I have to understand, like, I go to this menu and then I do this sub menu and then I come to this screen and then I configure these buttons and then I click this other thing. And, this is why we have administrators. This is why we have these training programs of like, okay, well, you can learn how to like navigate this big, crazy beast of, power that you have at your fingertips. The complexity has, for many companies, exceeded their ability to productively apply it. Like, I know this tool is capable of so much. We just haven't been able to like figure out how to like do it. And so what really excites me, one of the things that really excites me about generative AI is you're starting to see this new UI paradigm where if you can describe to the software in just plain natural language what it is you want, and then the software like translates that into like, oh, okay, so here, I can create this workflow for you that does this. Is this the correct workflow? It's not like a fully, black box automated sort of thing. Like it translates your request, it creates the workflow, or maybe it's something to create a report or analysis, but again, it's not just giving you the answer. It's showing you, oh, this is the report and this is how I configured it. Maybe it's giving me the answer I want, but I can also validate that like, oh yeah, no, that's the data field I want into that. And oh yeah, this is what no, let me tweak this other thing. I am incredibly excited about that use case because I feel this now is going to be a chance to close that gap between the power of what a lot of these tools have and our ability as like mere humans to be able to like, all right, I don't want to learn all this menuing system or all these different incantations. I just want to tell it what I want and have it kind of figure out how to do that for me. I think that's actually very real. And I think that's getting better at a very rapid rate.
Do you think I want to come back and talk about more agents, but do you think that's going to shrink the RevOps, marketing ops departments of organizations?
In many ways, I think it's going to change what the RevOps, marketing ops teams do. And I actually think those teams are going to grow. I think they're going to grow in value because here's the thing is there's this concept of, right, the theory of constraints. It's like whatever is the next bottleneck that holds me back from what I'm wanting to do. And so one of the bottlenecks we've had has just been the complexity of the user interface to some of the software. As AI starts to eliminate that bottleneck, the question becomes like, okay, well, what are the next bottlenecks? And frankly, a lot of the other bottlenecks are going to be around like, okay, all this AI stuff we want to do is only as good as the data that we have available to this. And how is our data ecosystem structured? And for a lot of companies, the data ecosystem is, how to say it generously, immature, right? It's like, I mean, and again, no fault to companies. It's just like, hey, wow, that isn't even.
It's really hard. It's a hard job. Yeah, it's a hard job to maintain a database.
Yeah. But I feel like this is the thing. And then I was talking about composability. Okay, well, again, making sure that these products have open data, that they have the right APIs, but then also putting the right governance around that, putting the right permissioning, making sure that like, okay, when this data is moving here, like how are we making sure that, the provenance of where that data came from and, any sort of like privacy requirements that we have around that data that are moving with it. This is hard work. And I think this is where operations teams, have a tremendous amount of value to make sure that, hey, as you're using all these really cool AI tools, we need to make sure that the foundation, the infrastructure that is supporting that, we need to get it from where it is here today to a much better place. We need to be able to maintain it. We need to be the keepers of that. I think that's a huge mission for the ops team.
Interesting. So you think the focus on the data is going to grow in the RevOps, sales ops, marketing ops divisions of well, maybe sales ops might be a little bit different, but from the marketing and RevOps component, you think that the focus on the data is going to even grow further?
The data, and then almost again, like the foundations. Like right now, a lot of ops teams, a lot of work goes into the execution because they're the only ones who have learned the incantations of the menus. And, I think as we start to democratize the ability for, more people can actually get executions out of these systems, by simply making the request in natural language, I think the burden shifts into making sure like, okay, but whether it's the underlying data, whether it's, the availability of the right services, whether it's the right permissions and governance model of what are people allowed to do or not allowed to do, like all of that is then essential so that when you democratize the capability for people to set up a workflow or run a report or, create a web experience for a customer, that they're doing that within the boundaries of, this, matches our data policies. This is using the right data. It adheres to, our brand standards. There's a whole bunch of things there to making sure the governance of what these democratized capabilities do is strong. And I think that's, there's a lot of runway for operations teams over the next 10 years on that.
Yeah, that's very interesting because obviously there's a lot of talk about that, right? Like, is it going to take jobs? Is it going to create jobs? Is it going to be the different jobs? And I was chatting to CEO of, and I'm going to butcher this. She was the ex CEO of and founder of 6 Sense. Now she's doing, I think, Mind One, or it's One Mind, or I think it's One Mind.
Okay, right.
One Mind. That's right. That's One Mind. And she is like, it's going to get rid of jobs. And I don't care, and I'm going to say it. But it's interesting the way you put it, especially with the theory of constraints. If like the focus is going to change, and it's going to be focused on another element that it's the bottleneck. So very interesting, Scott. Obviously, this would be a agent which focuses on building workflows, right? In the realm of agents, what else do you think needs to be on the radar of the AI agents needs to be on the radar of B2B marketers?
Well, I think people are definitely looking at these customer service and sales, like BDR, SDR type roles. Like, can we create these agents that prospects or customers interact with that get them answers more quickly, richer answers because they're like trained on all the data they have it at their fingertips. Their virtual fingertips. And I think that's very interesting. I think we're already, like the Klarna had, that was their main story before they talked about ditching Salesforce and Workday. It was like, oh, we've now actually ditched a bunch of our, customer service team because we're now having AI handle this. I think there is real value to that. I think on the customer service side, the degree to which people can go to an agent and without any waiting, immediately get 40, 50, 60, 70% resolution to like questions they have, that's going to be a really valuable thing. And I think as long as the operations for these things are structured in a way that if the customer can't get the resolution through the agent, then it's very easy for them to get connected with a human who can then like intervene on their behalf. I think that's going to be a win for everyone. I think on the sales side of things, I'm just a little bit more cautious because it's one thing if we talk about these agents handling essentially inbound requests, because again, in many ways, it becomes like a customer service looking model. It's like, hey, listen, I've got a question. What's the fastest way for me to get an answer from this company? If I can engage with their agent, then it can give me the information I need and take actions for me that I need. Yeah, actually, that's probably a really positive experience. I think where we get ourselves into trouble is, a lot of sales and marketing organizations, they're not purely inbound, they're outbound. They want to actually like help accelerate, or how do we call it? Nurture, prospects along in their journey. And to be honest, most prospects don't like being nurtured that way, and it's been this evolving battle of, more and more creative attempts, of, outbound sales and people becoming more and more wary of like, yeah, I'll just ignore that email or just ignore that call. I am concerned that if you turn these AI agents loose in these outbound motions, I think that's going to break the matrix. Customers are already at a point where like being assaulted by outbound humans
It's
the
too
efficacy
much.
is dropping.
Yeah.
The experience is generally not great. If it's AI agents like assaulting these folks with these outbound motions because, oh, well, we can do 1,000,000 times more of that. Yeah, we can send 1,000,000 emails. We can send an email every hour to them until they sign. That's just not going to go well. But my only hope there is I feel like, okay, that will break the matrix so quickly, that we will adapt. Either the stuff will just entirely get filtered out or, people realize, all right, we just got to shut that off. So, but I think it's going to be bumpy because I think people are going to experiment and someone's going to be like, can I just have this AI agent call 1,000,000 people for me 1,000,000 times? Why not?
I feel like the first 3 months is going to work really well. And then it's going to tank. So
what was
quickly.
it? Andrew Chen, is this guy who, if I may use a little bit of profanity, he coined the term years ago of the law of shitty click-throughs. That basically these creative marketers, right? They invent a breakthrough tactic that has this incredibly high conversion rate efficacy because it's never been done before. And then it starts to leak out and other people start doing it. And then more people start doing it. Next thing you know, the conversion rate just drops like a rock because, all right, well, that well has been, dried.
Dried very quickly. Very quickly. It's true. That's true. Scott, I also want to touch about the concept of service as a software. And I came across this when you were talking about one of your posts. So before we maybe dive into, how things are changing, can you define what you mean by service as software?
Yeah. So it is a little bit of a clever play on software as a service. And I think the easiest way to describe the transition is to look at it through the lens of pricing. So the way software as a service was largely priced in B2B was seats. All right, I'm going to buy this tool and I'm going to buy a copy of this tool for each of my sales reps or each of my marketers, and I pay this much per seat. The return I get from that investment is very much a function then of what those people do with that seat license. And actually, as we've seen, there's high variance in how effective people are at getting return and using that seat license. And that gets us into the issue of churn. And this has been the battle of SaaS for 20 years. The most compelling way to think about the inversion of that with service as a software is instead of buying seats, you basically are buying outcomes. So we were talking earlier about these customer service agents. Okay. Well, instead of buying a seat for customer service, it doesn't really work because it's an AI. It doesn't even necessarily have a mapping, to human seats. The way I pay for this customer service AI agent software is I pay per resolution. Every time it successfully resolves an incoming, customer service issue, I pay it $2. Now, this actually is a pretty radical shift in and it doesn't work for everything, right? I mean, this is always going to be the battle is okay, are the things we're selling, are they things that we can measure the outcome? Can we align it? There's going to be a whole bunch of other issues of how do we properly forecast the demand for, what these outcomes are going to be? But at its heart, it's a much closer alignment to what people really want, which is I don't want to buy software and then figure out how I, get an outcome. If I can just pay the software to deliver the outcome, wow, that's a really attractive proposition. And so that's what service as a software is. It's essentially outcome priced software, in my opinion.
And do you think, because I've definitely seen some of these where it's very outcome based, it's very business or it talks to the unit economics of the business. Do you think that is going to have what are your thoughts on the adoption of that? Because there are organizations that use a software really well and they pay a fixed rate and they have a very great operational layer on top of that. Where now you're going to be like, oh no, you're gonna pay more. Yes, we're gonna solve your problem, but they're going to be like, well, hold on, but I was paying for one seat and I was paying for 20 seats and I had 20 guns on it, and that was it. I didn't need to worry about this. But now I'm talking about like this variability, and sometimes I can't necessarily predict. Let's take the example that you talked about, the customer service. Sometimes I can't predict that. What are your thoughts? What do you think the impact of that
Yeah,
would
no,
be?
it's a great question. And I think this is where, at the end of the day, it will be good to give customers choices on that. Like, customers will have choices of like, hey, yeah, there's a set of software we can buy and we operationalize on top of that. And we're really good at that. And that's the most effective thing for us. There are going to be other companies that's like, nah, it just, it's actually better and easier for us to just buy these outcomes this way. We priced it into our model, some forecasting variation. What's interesting is there's kind of a middle ground between those two things. And that's this idea of usage-based pricing. And for a little while, if we set aside the outcome-based pricing of services and software, for the past few years have been sort of this shift in SaaS pricing, where some things were being priced based on the seats and some things were being priced on usage. And part of what has actually, when you think about like storage, the classic thing with like, cloud data warehouses or something like that, they don't price really on seats. What they're pricing on is like, okay, well, how much data or how much compute? Again, creates some interesting challenges for people to do the forecasting on that well, too. But it's a recognition that, yeah, not everything aligns just to a seat. I think what's happened here is in the world of all this AI stuff, particularly, these generative AI models that actually under the covers, like they're expensive to run. Like these things, you do not just get it for free. Despite some of the way in which things are being packaged in the go-to-market, it is not free for these, LLMs to do the magic they are. They cost compute for every single request that they're handling. So I think you are going to see some interesting things as companies want to leverage those sorts of models or more advanced AI services. It's not just going to be seat price because it's not going to align to that. So even if they have humans who are driving this, it's very likely that they're going to have to factor in usage costs of computer storage that those humans in those seats are doing. And then I think this will get to a place where, yeah, you will have models where you're like, hey, can we be more effective doing this where we're contracting usage-based capabilities and we run it? Or are there a set of things here where, frankly, this other company is specialized in figuring out how to optimize the costs in executing that? And they price us in a way where, for comparative advantage, it's actually going to be cheaper for us to just pay them for the outcomes of those. And for different businesses, for different use cases, it's not going to be like a one-size-fits-all answer.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting to see, and whether you would have a kind of similar thing to the cloud, where at one point everyone's like, we're going to the cloud, we're moving everything to the cloud, and yep, it's scalable. We could dial it down, we could dial it up, and then at one point the CFO starts calling the CIO and be like, sorry, why is our Azure bill so high? Where is this going? And then the conversation now in the past couple of years, like, do we need to, and especially I think with AI, is like, do we need to have our own data center? Do we need to go on-prem to kind of reduce this cost? So it would be interesting to see if that happens. The other probably last question on this topic that I have is, I'm curious to know, what are some of the tools that are on your radar? Obviously, HubSpot has a whole suite and platform of capabilities, but outside of HubSpot, I'm curious to know, what are some of the tools? And again, you have your fingers on the pulse of MarTech. What are some of the tools that you're really excited about, you're monitoring closely, or even you're using yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, certainly all of these generative AI models are like, it's almost a limitless well of things you can learn and experiment and do with. I follow a fellow named Ethan Mollick, who's a professor at Wharton, does a lot of writing about LLMs and is using them constantly. And I mean, it is amazing, like the things you throw at these, whether it's the latest ChatGPT or Anthropic or Gemini, and what they're able to do is like incredibly surprising. So I would say that whole collection of tools, like I could spend every day for the next year, like playing around with like ways to get value out of this and things I could apply it to and still not even scratch the surface. So I think those are sort of the elephants in the room. Those things are really, it's funny, the term GPT, it's like whatever that is for like the something transformer, that's what they mean when they say GPT. But there's another meaning of the word GPT historically, which is it stands for general purpose technology. And that's things like fire and electricity and the internet. And there's these things that they're not about just like a point solution for a specific thing. They're almost like an enabling capability that then we're able to apply to a very wide range of problems or innovative new use cases. And to me, that's what a lot of this generative AI stuff is it truly is a new general purpose technology. And so we're just even barely beginning to scratch the surface of what are the things we can do with this? What does this make possible? So anyways, that's one answer. I guess another thing I'll shout out, and I should disclaim I'm an advisor to a company in this space. So again, take anything I'm saying here as bias, but there's another field in AI that perhaps hasn't gotten as much attention because of all the hype around, generative AI, and that's reinforcement learning. That we finally now have a combination of the compute and the data to have these reinforcement learning algorithms actually start to do testing and learning for us. So like, and then the company I advise is called OfferFit, but there's other companies in the space like AMP. There's one of the CDP players, High Touch, has recently released a module to do reinforcement learning too. These are really exciting things where it's basically like, okay, I've got 1 million customers, for some, consumer brand, and I've got all these different possible ways I might engage with them, whether it's an email or some sort of mobile app push or something like this. And instead of having marketers manually create segments, manually decide I'm going to A/B test this variation versus that variation. I mean, a process that is actually very limited in its experimentation power and very costly in its just sort of manual process overhead. Like these reinforcement systems, reinforcement learning systems are getting to the place where they're like, oh, yeah, across these 1 million customers, we can be constantly trying these different variations and we learn which one is working and we understand how this segment of this customer actually uses this. It's not going to replace market. I mean, again, it's the same thing with generative AI. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is going to replace marketers. No, it's not going to replace marketers at the strategic level. It's not going to replace them at what is the actual core of what we're offering? What's the cores of our creative? But down at the tactical level of optimizing, which specific offers and content and engagement and channel is best for each particular customer. That's something we've never been able to do as humans. And I think these reinforcement learning AI technologies are going to open up actually a pretty cool set of possibilities there. And actually then the fun thing is, and this is, I'm just waving my hands because I don't know anyone's actually done this yet, but you start to combine the reinforcement learning algorithms with the generative AI that can say, okay, now I take all these components, but I use generative AI to actually try and craft that into something incredibly unique for each particular customer. And what's the efficacy of that? And how do I feed that performance loop back into the generative AI for how it evolves to the next one? I mean, this is stuff that's kind of science fiction-y, but it's actually not that far off. We've got almost all the little pieces and you start to put them together. I think it's going to be really exciting over these next few years.
I love it. Scott, before we wrap up, I have a couple of rapid fire questions I want to ask you. Ready? Okay. First question I want to ask you is, what is a resource? This could be a book, a podcast, a talk, a blog, whatever it is that in the past maybe 3 to 6 months you've come across and had a, you've either really enjoyed it or you think it's worth mentioning. What comes to mind?
I'd have to go with Ethan Mollick. And so he does a Substack, One Useful Thing. He writes a lot on LinkedIn too. But if you aren't following Ethan Mollick yet, follow him. Great source of insight into what's happening with generative AI.
Interesting. I do have one question that that asks about who are the people that you're following in this space. But
okay, I sort of got double duty off of that one, right?
No, sounds good. Sounds good. The other question I have is, what is something that excites you about B2B today? What is that one thing that you're most excited about?
Wow, so many things I'm excited about. I think one of the reasons I've always gravitated to B2B is it's this incredible blend of, in theory, you've got a very rational actor in the abstract, right? A company should behave in a rational way, but it's made up of a whole bunch of human beings who have all sorts of complexities and, not
Feelings
necessarily 100% rational things. And the way in which buying decisions get made of like any significance is it's not even one person and their particular like dynamic. It's these buying groups and the complex interactions between them and what are all the things that they're trying to factor in and what influences them and impacts them. I mean, that is an incredibly beautiful and complex, like we've come to use the phrase like account-based marketing, or account-based, sales and strategies. And it sounds very mundane, like, oh yeah, that's boring. Like the account-based marketing, what a snooze fest. When you actually dive into like the dynamics and the psychologies and the process of what's happening and how these accounts make decisions, I mean, this is an incredibly rich field. And it's one of the reasons why I think you continue to see so much evolution and innovation, around both the marketing technologies, but you continue to see even in the sales organization, people continually like adapting and learning. This is a thing that it's not infinite, but what's that phrase? It's indefinite. Like we can never actually see the end of like what's the possible strategies and tactics here that can work because they constantly evolve. And so, anyways, I don't know if this was going to be a rapid fire answer, I've failed miserably. But
it was a great answer. It was a great answer.
I actually find very sexy.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Last one. If you could give one advice to B2B
I'll
marketers.
be short on this one, I promise.
One advice to B2B marketers. What would you say?
Take a deep breath. It might feel like you're behind. Everybody feels they're behind. This technology is just moving so fast. As long as you're putting one foot in front of the other and trying to learn something new every day, you're in a great shape.
I love that. I think I definitely feel that, and I'm sure a lot of other people do.
I feel it too. We all feel it. That's the secret. It's like almost what, that Lake Wobegon thing, like all the children are above average.
Yes.
It's almost like the inverse Lake Wobegon. All the marketers are below average. We're all below average. Okay, fine.
Scott, this has been an amazing conversation. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all the insights.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Absolute pleasure.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Liza Maywald and Alexander Hipwell. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Liza and Alexander. Special thanks to Tina Wabe, we couldn't make this show without you. This episode was hosted by Shahin Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Growth Colony, check out our newsletter and subscribe with the link in the pod description. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just interested in a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. Or fill out the form in the description. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week right here on Growth Colony.